Our next presenter is Mike Avi. He is from Florida State University's SSA. He is a president of that group's SSA. He's also been an organizer for Southeast Secular Student Regional Conference. So give a big round for him and his presentation on how to deal with that guy.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm going to be talking today about how to deal with that guy. You know the one. So I'm going to move really quickly through this, and just a heads up, I'm one of those people that likes to make kind of a note/script that goes along with my PowerPoint. So if you see me look down at the computer, don't freak out. I'm just keeping up tabs with what I have on this screen over here as well. So who is that guy exactly? I spent a few years now interacting with the secular community and organizing and kind of getting to know people. And there's a handful of people who can kind of be described in one word, and that's disrespectful. And that's basically what sums up that guy. A person who disrupts the flow of the group, antagonizes members, who doesn't really have grace, so to speak, when they're interacting with people. And there are a few different types of that guy, and I'm going to be talking about the different varieties, and then going into a few examples about one, what to keep in mind when you're dealing with that guy, and then following that, how you might take a more direct approach. So you have the talkative twosome, the conqueror, the Johnny-come-lately, the complainer, the Techno Buff, and the infamous creeper. So before we move into some of those examples, I want to talk about some things you probably want to keep in mind. One, you're going to want to understand that everyone has problems. So we all have personal problems, and most of us leave them at home, and it can be frustrating when someone doesn't. So you work for your club completely voluntarily, you don't get paid, even though event organizing basically qualifies as a part-time job. So it can be very frustrating when you put in so much time and effort and people start disrupting your events or meetings or making your members uncomfortable or harassing you personally about the work that you do. And it can feel incredibly personal. And it is. But remember that you're not walking in that member's shoes or that potential member's shoes. So you have to try and have sympathy. And you have to keep in mind that you don't know what they might be going through. And that's something to keep in the back of your mind when you're moving between dealing with a more intense and direct approach versus something that's a little more diplomatic and kind of, under the table, so to speak. And that call for sympathy goes for regular members too. So I'm not just talking to the officers here, but also regular members in your groups. And we all know that the jobs of an officer is to provide a backbone, so to speak, to the group. You guys create an organizing impetus, so to speak, that allows the rest of the members to follow your leadership towards event planning and hosting gigs and having socials and getting to know people and having discussions. And for regular members, you know that your job is to support that backbone and have a good time. Nobody expects y'all to be psychologists, so you shouldn't have to delve into the childhood of this potential member who is antagonizing the group and figure out where their problematic behavior started. But what you are expected to do is make sure that that behavior stops as soon as you get into your meetings, because it disrupts the flow for other members and it can create an antagonistic culture that might actually bring your group down. So understand that everyone has problems too. Kill them with kindness. The sympathy leads from the first point, leads into the second point, and it's one that usually solves the issue for me without actually having to address the problem directly. That is pull them aside and have a conversation or anything like that. So you want to kill them with kindness, even though it might take a lot of emotional effort to be nice to someone who's rude and disrespectful. This can pave the way to a more collegial relationship. Instead of having defensive reactions to someone's antagonizations or criticisms or comments, just refuse to argue. Just don't argue, don't engage in that way. Engage in a different way. Point out the good in every situation, or point out specific positives you see about the work that another student is doing, or that you're doing, or that the club provides to the general community. And if it progresses beyond this and you find yourself in a position where you have an actually antagonistic member who doesn't want to pull back the reins, so to speak, on giving people some trouble, at least you know that you wore the white hat, you took the higher road, you were the bigger person. And unfortunately, sometimes it can be really tough to do that. I totally get it. Sometimes you might want to be like, keep your mouth shut during my meeting, god dang it. But it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Nobody likes taking orders, especially busy adults who are paying enormous amounts of money to attend your college or university, or going into a lot of debt in order to do it. And they're there to have fun too, even if they don't necessarily act as graceful as you might want them to. So at the very least, by avoiding statements that might be interpreted as antagonistic or inflammatory, you'll give those members the opportunity to open up while having the sensitivity needed to tackle and handle the situation professionally and effectively. So from there, I'm going to be talking about a more direct approach. And technically, there are two direct approaches that you could split it up into. So I'm going to be discussing the first one, which is what I like to call the respect, reflect, and direct method. Because sometimes issues require some confrontation. So everyone's a winner when an issue is solved tactfully, and savvy persuaders know that a way to get a person to change is to provide incentive and show them that you're interested in their concerns, which is respect, demonstrate that you understand and sympathize with those concerns, which is reflecting on the issues that they're presenting to you, and then offering an alternative solution that appeals to that person's self-interest, which is directing their frustration or the issue at hand in a specific solution directive set. So there are a couple different methods that you can try, but my favorite is starting by asking direct and open-ended questions. So I'll give you a few examples in a minute for different types of members, but you're going to want to paraphrase your member's answer when you ask that question. You're going to say that you're concerned, you want to help resolve the issue, and then depending on the feedback you get, you can offer a solution. And sometimes there aren't solutions, and sometimes you have to be flexible. And I'll be talking about that in some of the examples. Excuse me. But that's why you should refrain from saying like, shut up or quit your yapping. Because even when bad behavior seems to justify such a response, the fact is you'll probably have much better luck if you stress the benefit to the participant instead of going headfirst into some of the issues that they're bringing forward into the group. You can also try saying like, it's been my experience that this meeting is more effective when you do X, Y, Z. Or during meetings in the past when I was a regular member, I got a lot more out of it when I did like ... And officers, remember that your job is to help facilitate a quality meeting to everyone who shows up, no more, no less. So keep that in mind when you're tackling this. These people are also potential members, even if they might be antagonistic, and there might be a solution that benefits all. So let's consider some examples, and I'm going to pop back over here and let you guys kind of look at the different breakdowns that I gave. I'll talk about the talkative twosome. So have you ever gotten the feeling that your meeting is being confused with a chat room? Nothing gets under an officer's skin, like myself, faster than the back corner clique that like regularly hosts like a Pokemon debate or talks about the Green Party Packers game, or the Green Bay Packers game, sorry. Or I was literally just talking about the Green Party before this. Or gossips about what Stacy and Monique were wearing in class yesterday. Oh my God. So you might feel like you might want to shout like, hey Travis, I heard there's there's a Pikachu outside in the hallway, so let me know when you catch it and come back inside when you're done. Or like, McCarthy hasn't gotten them past 4 divisions in the last 6 years, and nobody cares about that team since 2010. So like, write in your journal and cry a sad story and then move on. But you can't say those things. It's rude. And it puts people down and makes them uncomfortable, and generally it's an antagonistic way to deal with the situation. So what you want to consider, despite the fact that their behavior might be wildly inconsiderate and disruptive to those trying to focus on the presentation, is to try a few different solutions. First, if your space allows, you're going to want to try and walk in between them. So you can just position yourself in between and wait while you're presenting until they're quieted down. So they're not quite as chatty. They'll kind of get the hint usually. You might shrug it off, in which case you can try some other things. If your space doesn't really allow, you're going to want to go up to them after the event and be like, I noticed that you were distracted today. Was there anything about my presentation that you had questions about, or are you feeling a little bit weird about some of this stuff? Excuse me. And if they shrug that off and say there wasn't like a problem, which a lot of times they do, you're going to finish by saying you're concerned that without the proper level of focus, your meetings can become a lot less helpful, and you'd like to encourage everyone to work with you towards developing that level of focus. Pardon me for a sec. Super nervous, sorry guys.
Great.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so if a chat isn't hostile, you always want to thank people after you've made some suggestions, and say it like you mean it, because they're considerate enough to talk to you and give you their time and be there at that meeting, and consider some of the things that you're putting forward for how you might want them to improve, even if they don't necessarily apply it right away. Also, people walk away from conversations a lot more positively if you thank them, even if they didn't do anything to deserve the thanking outright. All right, my next example that I want to talk about is the conqueror. So it happens. Some days your meetings will turn into a game of world conquest, like the board game Risk. Seriously, the person responsible for creating the craziness is usually the person who wants the combat zone in order to plant a flag, declaring a permanent meeting room spot. This is my seat, and they will defend it by any means necessary once they get it. And I've actually had that happen. In my first year as president in my group, which is about 2 years ago, I actually saw a guy in our meeting stage a series of coups d'etats, successively claiming seats as unsuspecting students left the room to get water or use the restroom, until he got to the seat that he eventually wanted. And he was reclaiming the seats that he insisted belonged to him every time. But it left my members so paranoid the next meeting that they insisted on ending the meeting early in order to have a group pee break, because they didn't want to lose their seats altogether, and they were afraid that somebody else will take them. So kids these days, it happens. But in some cases, this kind of territorial behavior has less to do with selfishness and being rude, and more to do with room acoustics or tackling temperature problems or things like that. People can hear in the back. They want access to specific breakouts, discussions, or they want to sit next to their friends. So before confronting a troublemaking Napoleon Bonaparte, so to speak, try figuring out why they want the seat so badly. And it might help when pulling them aside to point out that trying to view the meeting from different perspectives and mixing with new students will give them a chance to network more, might give them a chance to get more varied breakout discussions if your group does that. You could also try methods like assigned seating or coin flipping. Sometimes you have to be a little flexible, but gotta do what you gotta do. All right, so the next example I want to talk about is Johnny come lately. So your meeting room is packed to the gills, the conversation is flowing, the members are engaged and excited about a topic, and everything is just perfect. And then all of a sudden, ominous footsteps echo from outside the room. Everybody goes quiet as their necks furiously pivot on their shoulders and the eyes are staring intensely at the doorknob. Everyone sees it kind of jiggle a little bit, and suddenly the door bursts open and a booming "yah" enters the room, shattering the windows, and people scream in terror, and lights begin flickering on and off, and a metal chair catches on fire, and maniacal laughter in German can be heard as Hitler's face, in a ghostly visage appears in the center of the room about 10 times larger than usual. And in walks in a late-coming member, carelessly interrupting your meeting. People wail and loathe and cry out in despair at their inconsiderate tardiness. Whatever will you do? Deep breaths. If it's not a regular thing, like once a month, you grab the fire extinguisher and put out the metal chair, and then you bring them aside. But if this sort of thing becomes something that's not easy to accommodate because you have multiple members doing it, or like that one guy who comes in late every single meeting, you're going to want to take them aside and try and beg your pardon. You're going to want to take them aside and try and figure out what the source of the recurring tardiness is. Sometimes it's things that they can't help. For example, if they have transportation issues, if they have a conflicting work schedule or a conflicting class schedule, those are things that you're going to have to work around. So you say okay, yeah, I'll see whether or not any members live by you or are coming from that area when they're coming to the meeting, or we'll get you a ride. Or, okay, yeah, we'll have you buddy up with somebody, and they can, explain, if they don't mind, what's been going on in the meeting up to this point. And so you don't have to interrupt while they're like, hey, what are you guys talking about? What's going on? I'm so lost. I don't understand what's going on in this meeting. But If they're just rude or they lose track of scheduling, that might be a good person to single out for reminder texts or Facebook messages, which I've actually had to do a couple of times. So simple like, hey, just wanted to remind you that the meeting is tonight at 7 p.m. sharp. Followed with a little smiley emoticon. It lets people know that they're valued and that you care about their attendance and that they should probably take a hint about when they come in. All right, the next person I want to talk about is the complainer. So everyone has this person. I swear, it's true. We have somebody who's like, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too loud, you're too quiet, the weather sucks, I hate ice cream, the bourgeoisie are oppressing the proletariat. And we've all dealt with that member. And sure, it's okay to be frustrated with the lack of ideal weather conditions or popular desserts or the relative sedation of the working class chattel. But hey, mister, nobody likes a Debbie Downer. So maybe let's keep it down. Am I right? And still, some folks don't feel right unless they're moaning about one thing or another. So I guarantee sooner or later, if you don't have one in your group now, somebody will wander in and be that guy at your meeting. So when they complain, the first thing to do is figure out if the problem can be addressed quickly and directly. So if it's too cold, see if you can't change the thermostat. Or if it's too loud, ask members to quiet down while someone's speaking, or ask the person to speak louder. But some things, like overthrowing the aristocratic owners of the means of production, take a little bit longer than a meeting. So it can't be completed, and in those cases it might be helpful to relate to that member. The upper class will have to remain in power for the duration of this meeting, but we'll talk about it afterwards and see what we can do. And a complainer is fairly easy to deal with because they've already told you what their problem is. You don't have to really seek it out as far as getting them to be like, oh God, I'm grumpy, I don't want to talk to you about it. They've already complained, they've already said what the problem is. So almost always helping the complainer to understand the situation is the best recourse. All right, the next example I'm going to be talking about is the Techno Buff. This is actually the biggest that guy concentration in my group. I don't know about you guys. It's the type of member where we live in a new era of technological development, and phones and technology give us a lot of efficiency, but sometimes it can be a huge distraction. So you see people pick up the phone and they're like, yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, I'm in a meeting right now. Yeah, I have a minute. Wait, no, he didn't. He did what? He did not. He did not. No, tell me more. Yeah. Oh, you did not. What did you do? Oh my God, what did he do when you did that? What did he say? And as much as we like to pretend we're adults, nobody at this point cares that they actually interrupted the meeting. We just really want to know what he did and what they did and what he did because of whatever they did. But that would be weird to ask, so we all have to pretend to be frustrated that we were interrupted when really we just want juicy gossip. And if you're an officer, part of pretending is that you don't care about what he did. You have to pretend you don't care about what he did, and that means you have to act like it was distraction and prevent incidents from like that from happening again. And I know it's tough because we're aware that it's really just a coping mechanism so that later on in life when we're laying in bed at night, we can convince ourselves that we were actually just asking the question, why were they so rude instead of what did he do? But this is one of those things that is easier to handle if you nip it in the bud. So I learned that last semester when I was dealing with serial texters and things like that, or not this past semester, it's actually the last semester of my freshman year. We had some people who were serial texters, and I was like, hey, can you guys not, this is super distracting and kind of rude, and you're not participating in discussion, and people are starting to notice this, and they're not taking this group as seriously. But it was halfway through the semester by the time I'd really spoken up. So they were like, well, I was doing it last meeting, so I don't understand why it's a problem now. And it got very difficult to enforce. So by starting up the year and saying hey, so we have a new policy. If you're going to be taking a call, you need to exit the room immediately. And if you're going to be texting, only do it in times of emergency because we want everyone to be as focused as possible. But sometimes you have to use a firm hand. So sometimes you can't be diplomatic and have conversations and try and fix the situation in a completely adult manner. Sometimes you have to twist arms a little bit or go for outside help. And when it's completely personal or you're being harassed, that's one of those situations where the respect direct method doesn't really work. So in that case, you'd want to use a firm hand. In another case, when they're not really receiving the message, but you're pretty sure that you can still handle this internally, it's not a huge deal. It's like, oh, they're like texting a lot, but like they don't seem to get that this is actually as big of a deal. I don't think that they realize that it's actually upsetting our members or myself or whoever. In that case, like pull them aside and be like, all right, you're being a dick. But, you know, in a more adult manner, and be like, you should probably dial this back a bit, without the probably. And, you know, twist arms a little bit. You're an officer if you're a leader. So you need to be confident in what you're doing as far as approaching members one-on-one. So I have some tips for using a firm hand. One is to act confident. Two, don't play the passive-aggressive game. Like, never ever do that. Passive aggression just allows people to have the opportunity to delay the issue or like allow tension to build up or to create problems with other members and drag people in. If you address the problem immediately, you can have it taken care of. The third issue is checking your sensitivity level. Because I notice a lot of times people let their emotions get in the way of handling a group conflict in a mature manner. So you might want to jump from being like, I will be a diplomat, to being like, you know, screaming at them. And sometimes it can be very frustrating if somebody's rude or disruptive or doesn't have respect for the group or the values that you guys are putting forth. But if you check your sensitivity level and wonder like, is this really as personal as it feels, or is this just something that, you know, I need to set aside for a second and tackle it as an officer instead of, you know, as like a one-on-one individual, you might be able to dial those emotions back and handle it more adult-like. And finally, sometimes you have to get outside help, and that's where the creeper comes in as a set type. There are so many different types of creeper that I could probably give a presentation on that just in and of itself. But when it breaks down to it, if there's harassment in your group of any kind, if there are cases of discrimination, or if there's severe ostracization that can't be solved very quickly, if there are cases of abuse, or you hear about neglect in home, you're going to want to go to university administration. Or if it's more immediate, like you're worried about self-harm or things like that, you're going to want to call the police. Because you want people to be as safe as possible, and these are not just your members, they're also your family or your potential family while you're at the university. So, in essence, use your best judgment. You can't fix everyone's problems, and you're not expected to. That's what university counseling is for. That's what outside resources are for when things get a little out of hand. So, beyond that, are there any questions?
What about when you have that guy who is maybe not disruptive during meetings, but is someone who does not have a great public presence, and is basically just making everybody else in your group look bad, and they've gained themselves like a reputation on campus as kind of a dick.
Yeah.
And is and is really kind of a dick on public-facing things like Facebook, including potentially your own SSA Facebook. And
yeah.
How do you deal with that appropriately? Because we have a member who's kind of a, I hate to say this, kind of a meninist, and he also
So you have a neckbeard.
Yeah, we have a neckbeard, and it's a problem because it's like every worst stereotype about atheism.
Yeah, you can say the word. It's okay. This is safe space.
It's so frustrating because I want to be like, do you realize how bad you make us look?
Yeah,
Please,
it's definitely a problem. Every group has those two.
Try and delete something off of like the public-facing page that he put up there that's terrible. It's like, censor shit. And it's a difficult thing to deal with it in a professional way without confronting them and being like.
I'd keep freedom of assembly in the back of your mind when the censorship thing comes up, because you have every right to control the tone of your group and the way it presents itself, especially as somebody in position of leadership or somebody who's an officer. So if they're misrepresenting the values of Secular Student Alliance or Center for Inquiry or Secular Coalition for America, whatever your chapter is, or they're misrepresenting the values of the individuals who comprise your group, they're essentially speaking for you, and that violates your own assembly as you want to conduct it. But beyond that, I would try the diplomatic method first. So you might want to pull them aside and be like, hey, I noticed that you're saying some things that might be a little bit caustic. And I understand that this is how you feel on a personal level, but it's reflecting negatively on the organization and we've received some negative feedback. If you don't mind dialing your tone down, things like that. But if they're one of those people that responds negatively or they don't really pick up on the fact that this is actually a serious issue and you're 100% down with it, depending on what they're doing, you might actually want to consider getting administration involved. Move step by step. So diplomatic, firm hand, arm twisting, administration. If they're doing something that's absolutely egregious, like posting like neo-reactionary things on your Facebook timeline, you might want to block them. Yeah, what's up?
What about if that guy is a fellow member of the officer board?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It happens. Well, depending on how your officer board is set up, and also how your constitution is set up, you might consider trying to oust them from a position of leadership.
One of the fellow officers happens to be dating him. To be fair, they were dating before they were both in the organization and officers, but it's still very complicated because there are personal issues involved, and like there are some people that have problems with them and then some people that don't. So like I couldn't get him kicked out, like even if I felt like that was necessary, it wouldn't really be possible because I wouldn't have enough support to do that. So I'm just like, how do you deal with that? Because I'm struggling.
All right, this is the last question because we're running out of time. But so what I would recommend doing is you're probably going to be in a position where you have to play cleanup officer for maybe a semester, maybe a year, and it's tough, but you might have to do it. Work towards creating a better relationship with the people in your group until you've put yourself in a position where you might actually be higher up as an officer than they are, if that's the case, when you have elections again. If it's not democratic, sorry, you're screwed. But you might still be able to take care of some of the stuff and persuade them on a personal level. So work through diplomatic stuff, explain like that you've heard from this person or that person or random people that they felt uncomfortable about this specific thing they said, and you're concerned that it's actually making members uncomfortable, maybe they should not say it. Approaching people with respect is always the best method, and saying it in ways that don't make them feel as though they have to defend themselves, but instead feel as though they might be incentivized to change the behavior are probably the most effective recourses for you to see change. Yeah. It's generic, but it's true.